Hey guys, welcome back to the show. We are only 18 days away from the conference. We're extremely excited to see all of you out there. It's right around the corner. Tickets are still available if you would like to join us. You can get a 4-day pass, a 1-day pass, a live stream pass, whatever you feel compelled to do. We'd love to see you there. On-site lodging, as you know, is sold out, but we might have 1 or 2 rooms opening up. So email us if you do want to stay on site. There is a possibility if you get to us before someone else, you might get the room. So that's good news if someone was looking forward to staying on site. Hopewell Farm CBD, guys, if you're looking to try a new CBD, I highly recommend their products. In particular, I've become a fan of their topical ointment, their skin salve. It's great for bug bites, poison ivy. I mean, any skin condition you have, there's nothing better. They will be a vendor at the conference as well, and you will get their 10% discount at the venue. Eric and Nancy, they're beautiful souls, and they put that energy into their products. I highly recommend it. But if you want to get their product now, you can save 10% on all of their merchandise with promo code Journey to Truth 10, and that link is below in the description. And all of the conference information can be found at journeytotruthcon.com. Now that that's out of the way, today, we are joined by SunBow TrueBrother. He's an author, Contactee, Shamanic Practitioner, in particular, a Contactee of the Sasquatch. He has written 3 books, The Sasquatch, Message to Humanity. I personally haven't read them. I wish I had. Aaron has read the first 2. Aaron, do you want to let them know about the books? What's your experience with them?
They are incredible. It's channeled material from a Sasquatch elder. And it's just all about the history of the planet, of the human race, of the Sasquatch race, of all these different races, like the ant people, and just any race you can think of. And it's just like this galactic history and galactic information, and information about humanity, and like what got us to this point and where we're going. And it's incredible. I mean, it's some of the most like comprehensive material I've ever read, honestly, and it's mind blowing. I've read. There's 3 books. I've read the first 2, and they're incredible. And I just started book 3 right here, so I'm really excited to get through this one.
Even the energy from the cover is beautiful. I have checked out your interviews, and I'm very familiar with what you've shared in the interview. So I'm excited to dive in, and we're going to do this interview a little bit backwards. Instead of having you tell the whole story, we're going to just hit the ground running and get into some of the message that the Sasquatch has for us, and some of the current stuff that everyone wants to know about, and other questions I have about things that have come through as far as the procession of genetic experiments and why they started with the fish, the ants, reptilians, birds, humans, then Sasquatch. I think that's very fascinating, and the Council of Star Elders. But before we get into all that, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me. I was surprised last time I saw your show. First time I saw your show, actually, your last one, I guess. To hear Aaron sharing about my books, and so I shared that last podcast of yours on my website.
Oh, that's great. Which episode was it?
The first roundtable for the conference that we did.
Okay. So in the interviews and the books, you mentioned how the Sasquatch are hybrids, just like us, and there's a lot of genetic experiments that were done to create even all the races that I just mentioned. Could you explain how that works and how we got here and what that looks like for the future?
Yeah, the Sasquatch, as tested by the Sasquatch Genome Project, a 5-year study in many independent laboratories of 111 DNA samples of Sasquatch. It shows that they carry mitochondrial DNA of human mothers, but in their nuclear DNA carries some totally unknown genes from an unknown species, unclassified species. So this shows itself that they are a hybrid, a mixture of human and something else, but also their genes are alternate with single and spliced genes. Only them and us humans have this, which does not occur in nature. So it shows that they and we have been genetically modified at some point in the past.
And you mentioned that we basically share 99% of the same DNA. And I think that explains why when people do get a hair sample or something, it just comes back as human, because people are looking for apes, but it's not really an ape. It's just another, I guess, a more advanced version of us, possibly.
Yeah, more ancient, that's for sure. And also, there might over millions of years, we know us human, Homo sapiens, modern humans, have interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovan. We all carry some part of those genes, different hominin species. So if we extend with the Sasquatch, how many types of hybrids and crossbreeds there could have been over millions and millions of years? It's beyond our actual knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
This happens on all planets, actually, where intelligent life is seeded.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the procession of genetic experiments, why did they start with the fish and then go to the ants and the reptilians? Why that order?
Simply because that was the most abundant available genetic stock in those phases of, we could say, of creation or development of the world. The first phase, when you come to a planet you want to settle, is to implant individual souls to awaken individual consciousness that can incarnate in different life forms. And usually at the beginning of planets, there's water, the sea, even modern science say we come out of the water, the primordial sea that is also found in many ancient spiritual traditions. And from there, you have to do landmass terraforming. You have to develop, and all this is it's a natural process, but it can be accelerated, can be facilitated by intelligent intervention. That's, for instance, they said panspermia. Scientists have this centuries. This theory exists that life came from somewhere else on Earth, maybe on meteorites, as most often thought. But if we add intelligence to this process, there's colonization and terraforming, gardening, and developing biodiversity and ecosystems to implant conscious, intelligent life that can manage this planet. So why they use first like fish or water beings? Because that was a water environment. Then they used insect or ant genes because they were abundant then, and they're the best colonies to develop terraforming, form dig tunnels, build mountains, and all this. Then it became the reptilian, the lizard or snake people, who developed deeper into psychic abilities. And then it went to the avian, and this is the natural development of life forms on Earth. And the bird people. Finally, to end with the mammal people, the first ones were the Sasquatch. They are like a earlier version of the humanity.
Mm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So,
Yeah.
and this information comes from the Sasquatch that you're in communication with. So, who was doing the genetic experiments?
There were many. There's lots of different life forms and intelligent life forms in the universe, and many have visited this planet since even before human existed. So these many groups, sometimes there's like councils, confederations that unite several groups and factions. There's also some rogue factions. Sometimes they're not all people on Earth, same as not all people in the universe work for the best interest of all. Some have their own agenda and their own power, hunger, and they seek domination. And we're all intertwined with all these different species that have visited Earth since the dawn of humanity.
Right. So I guess it's all very interesting to me as far as I just never expected them. I didn't think the Sasquatch were a genetic experiment. I always thought they were more native to the planet. So it's very interesting to me to hear the procession of things as far as that goes. And you mentioned they also were part of the Lemurian civilization and Inner Earth. And you also mentioned the Hollow Moon, which I'd love to get into as well. But can you shed some light on how they were coexisting with the Lemurians?
Yeah, they were actually living. Lemuria was the southern half of land masses, you can say. At some point, there was Pangaea, one big continent that split in two, and later it split in several continents. And so the Lemuria represents actually billions of years of Earth history that predate humanity as well. So that's where first human ancestors were conceived and seeded, and as well taught, educated. And that's found in many, many ancient traditions around the world. The Sasquatch were part of those elder species that were there to assist to our conception and our education.
So, do they reside, like right now, obviously they're multi-dimensional beings. They have all these abilities that, humans struggle to develop, teleportation, telepathy, remote viewing, the orbs, UFOs, you name it. It seems like they're capable of all of it. Would they have been, or are they residing inside the planet right now, or just outside of our existence in another dimension?
Both, actually, because we're all multidimensional beings. Science admits that physical matter is 3% more or less of the energy we can perceive and calculate. So that means that 97% of energy, at least, that is not physical, but it is still real. It is still a part of the fabrics of the universe. With some call, we can go into corticate into dark matter, antimatter, kind of. But that's a long story. But this to explain that we live in a multiverse, a multi-dimensional universe, and we are part of this multi-dimensional existence. We are not limited to this physical body of a molecule, which is itself a holographic projection, in fact. It's just an energy field. So, the more we understand these fabrics of the universe, the more we can develop interdimensional knowledge and abilities like star beings or Sasquatch elder species have, and switch between one dimension to the other. And we realize very soon that only this physical matter is subject to linear time limitations.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as we jump to another plane, that's why there can be teleportation, there can be time travel. So when the species like Sasquatch or evolved star beings who have these abilities and knowledge, they're not caught like we are in our general level of consciousness now as humans. We are more caught in the physical plane because we barely recognize or open to the other dimensions. Our science is getting there, but our consciousness has to catch up.
You mentioned the Council of Star Elders. This is something very fascinating to me. We hear about all kinds of galactic councils, confederations, federations. Is this all the same thing, just different words for it? Or how would you describe this group, and how does one become a member of this council?
Yeah, there's different names to express more or less the same concept. And there's also different levels of councils or federation. As an example, I met a Hopi master who was very knowledgeable and famous, and he told me he had a collection of old spaceship parts on his yard, and he told me that he used to land behind his house on Professor Rock on Hopi land, take him for rides and give him teaching, and he was the only human representative in that confederation of 12 planets, he called. That's one circle, but if we extend to galactic or intergalactic or beyond scales, there's always a greater and greater level of consciousness required for beings to manage not only worlds but galaxies and universes. So the ones that I've worked with, that have contacted me, that I see their ship and I ask who they are, and they tell me they come from many places I have no idea about, I've never heard of. But they all come together in this council of star elders to watch over the worlds and the universe.
So are they acting as like ambassadors, or would you be an ambassador for them? How does that work? And obviously they're here assisting, right? I mean, I would imagine they're trying to help us through these hard times.
They definitely are. They are. We can say there's different roles and different level of evolution. So basically, the first condition to be admitted in that council is to reach a level 1 of civilization, which is a planetary civilization that is living in perfect harmony with its environment without destroying it, without draining the resources, and without fighting among ourselves. And we're not there yet, but there are people who have always promoted or worked towards those values, towards a peaceful civilization. And these people can sometimes be reached or contacted to transmit some information and messages, because at this point of our universe, of our history, they cannot come and land on the White House lawn as many people ask. Why? Because they'll be shot, or we're not ready to listen to what they have to say. So they find people who are prepared and trained to channel messages at this time of our history, because they used to walk among us. There's many traces I have actually touched alien mummies in Peru, and there's plenty of discoveries of alien skulls around the world that are always covered up, but I have first and second hand experience with this kind of remains that show that there's definitely plenty of proof that we're not alone and we've never been alone on this planet.
Mm-hmm. So, going back to the council, I guess this would be like wise elders of Sasquatch. So if there's when we say council of star elders, is it just comprised of Sasquatch, maybe different species within that, or is it other star beings as well?
It's all different types. The Sasquatch are one, and the Sasquatch so many million years of history. They find, petrified human-like footprints, usually bigger than human, around the world, that are dated 200 or 300 million years. So that's as long as we can, at least as we can think they've been around this planet. But they've also been around other planets because they travel the star elders. So when I asked a couple times, especially during channeling sessions and stuff, ship comes and hovers there or communicates. And I asked where you come from, and they started showing me their faces, like real fast. And each face was different, different species, different. It's basically like we could a pale comparison, the United Nations for us humans,
Mm-hmm.
but that's intergalactic.
Yeah, except they have better intentions than the United Nations.
Right.
So you mentioned that humans used to be a part of this council, but not any longer. Obviously, things have shifted and things have changed. Can you explain how that happened?
That's also found in many ancient teachings, and including the Hopi. I mentioned the Hopi often because I was adopted by the Hopi, and I learned a lot of early initiations and very amazing teaching and magic that cannot all be told, but including several spaceships and things like that, like a flying city. So okay, so that's this white bear, Master White Bear, was still part of that council. Flying, they would land on this. He showed us where they left the marks behind his house and everything. So there are others too as well. I'm convinced around the world that are recognized and can act as ambassadors to sit among the star people. Otherwise, they use telepathy, channeling, and because as a collective, our civilization is in dire, critical downfall. We can say it's not sustainable. It's not going to last very long the way it's going. And we always hear about a new war and with the nuclear on the table and all these things. There's it's not looking good with the environmental crisis, the biodiversity depleting. We can guess that this way of life, as many prophecies have said, will end somehow, probably in catastrophe, maybe violently. Part of our own action, of nature's response.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they can't come in here right now and speak with our leaders, because I don't like to say our leaders, those leaders who mislead humanity, who have all the power and the resources, actually, do have their own secret space program to fight their Star Wars. So they cannot come and sit with us and let's say smoke a peace pipe or whatever. They have to wait until there's safe landing spot and enough people ready to welcome them.
So we've been kicked out of the club until we get our act together. And I am going to start calling them misleaders instead of leaders. you mentioned that there's a secret genocide campaign against the Sasquatch, even. So they're also, in this game as well, in this war as well. What does that look like for them? And does that correlate to the transhumanist agenda that we see now?
So related. I published also after the Sasquatch Research to Humanity, the encyclopedia of all things Sasquatch, hairy humanoids from the wild. That is a documented research in all the 5,000 years of documentation about Sasquatch. There's many cases since ages of hairy humanoids that were hunted down, sometimes killed, captured, displayed in circus and stuff like that. There's plenty of evidence that those contacts have happened on the 5 continents since ever. The cover-up started around the late 1800s. Until then, even in when the Yeti tracks were discovered by the British geographic and all that.
Mm-hmm.
They made it like a interesting, valid topic of research. To the point where all the big powers put up secret expeditions to hunt down the Yeti, the Sasquatch, and other such beings, including United States, Great Britain, Russia, China, Japan, France, and other countries that put up some well-funded, well-equipped, armed expeditions to hunt the hairy humanoids. And that started before the 50s, at least. In the 50s, it was an ongoing practice. Many of those expeditions are documented, but there's always a cover-up coming with it. For instance, the infamous Yeti memo from the U.S. Embassy in Nepal that give the guidelines for the Yeti hunters. That if they find any picture, any DNA sample, body, any evidence, they have to keep it secret and bring all the evidence to the government. That's an official U.S. document. And we find out that afterward, in the 60s and 70s, there were these expeditions were still going on everywhere. And there were in 1963, there was the International Committee for Research into Hairy Humanoids based in Rome, with members from all these countries I mentioned, but including from the CIA, MI5, KGB, and so on. These were the institutions, the agencies involved in chasing Yeti and Sasquatch, and they're trying to tell us that they never found anything. Because that's when the cover-up started. They started to hide everything they could find.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. I just wonder how that works, because it seems like they're very intuitive, telepathic, so they know the intention of whoever is coming. Like if you go out with a gun, obviously they're not going to show themselves. So how would they even capture them if they're multidimensional? How could they capture them?
They're not invulnerable. They're not immortal. And there's reports that they're being shot at and they seem unaffected, but doesn't mean they don't feel it. There's also often the ones captured are usually youngsters or females, most often. The reports we find since the Middle Age and the Antiquity. So there are certain situations where they can be vulnerable, like if they're sleeping, if they're surprised in an ambush, or if they're not quite skilled enough to teleport or to become invisible. And more with modern technology now, with all kind of infrared goggles and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So we hear over time throughout history, there's also reports of Sasquatch or Bigfoot attacking people. Now, I would imagine they're just like humans. There's good and bad of everyone, right? So would these be rogue groups that have defected, or like what would explain the attacks? Because apparently they're very benevolent. They're here to help us, but some people are scared of them. Maybe you could help us understand what's happening there.
Yeah, I wrote a few chapters about the attacks and the abductions and these aspects. It is obvious if we look at, let's take one, maybe the most famous monster case of the folk monster, Boggy Creek monster.
Mm-hmm.
They made movies, books, and there's a festival and monster march, all from that story. Well, that's a unique incident that's lasted a few days back in 1970 or something. Of one family that saw a Sasquatch put his hand in the house and started shooting him, and then the Sasquatch threw a guy down, and the guy had a couple bruises and scratches, and that became like a big monster story. If we have a look at deeper at this case, we find out that in the same area, Boggy Creek, there's over 250 reports in 1 century. Well, that means many more sightings. And there's this one incident when the Sasquatch got mad and threw the guy on the ground because they were shooting at him.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at all these many stories of attack, you find out there's first of all, it's a tiny minority of encounters. It's a very exceptional case, and usually it's often armed parties, hunting parties, or posse that are after them. So they will defend themselves.
It's in defense, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Peaceful until provoked.
Yeah.
Right. They're not going around attacking people unprovoked. That's not happening. Yeah.
Right.
And they often reported as throwing rocks or logs. But if you look at all those cases, they'll throw them next to the person to frighten them away, not to hurt them. They could kill in one shot. That they will just ward off the intruders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very true. And I've always wondered that you always see the logs or the rocks landing next to them. That makes perfect sense. And sometimes it's not that the person's there to threaten them, but they just don't want them in their territory. It's their home, whatever. That's why if you're going out, I always believe in somehow, if you can communicate, ask for permission, or at least thank them for allowing you to be on their land. Just show some sort of respect and honor them. And anyway, I think that goes a long way. So as far as the message to humanity, right? Is there anything that's coming through right now about our current times or our future that you haven't really had a chance to share yet that you would like to share?
Well, what they asked me to share in those books is still pretty much actual. And I would say maybe even more and more on some levels. First, there's some things they try to remind us about our multidimensional nature, which means we have a soul, a spirit. We are not we are immortal. We're not limited to this physical shell, and we also all connected. So we have to to develop our empathy, which is our natural state of communication with our whole life. This way we can reconnect with our ancient wisdom that is being widely lost. It's not gone, it's just been forgotten. And this wisdom and truth, we can say, are eternal exist everywhere all the time, and they don't depend on the ones carrying it. Everyone can access. So that's a little bit one of the main things. One of the other things, there are warnings, namely about geoengineering, for instance, or the transhumanist agenda, because that's a great turning point in our evolution as a species and as a collective, for our collective consciousness. Because if we become parts cyborg, or our DNA is altered, we're not all quite as human as we were supposed to we were created. And then we can also be more easily controllable by AI or whatever.
Right.
Electromagnetic wave can be used. And if we're just like our natural self as we were meant to be.
Right. Our natural bodies are a greater technology than any of that. It's so much greater than any of that. We just have to learn how to tap into that and how to utilize it. So, and like you just said, you nailed it. It's about control, because as soon as they start getting this artificial technology into us, this transhumanism, then they can control it. And that's what it's all about. That's what every agenda playing out, every nefarious agenda playing out on the planet is all about control. And then you got to ask yourselves, who is behind this control? Who are the groups at the top of this pyramid of control, and who is behind this agenda? And people talk about the cabal or the Illuminati, and that's kind of like the human pyramid, but there's negative ETs above them. They're not the top of the pyramid. They're controlled themselves, and that's what people need to understand. And then people talk about the reptilians, the Draco, and the Greys, and these kind of like negative ETs that are kind of manipulating things behind the scenes. So I think a lot of our benevolent ET star family and friends are helping to fight the war that we can't really fight, like to clear out these negative influences, so that we can clean up our own mess, and that we can evolve unhampered and unsuppressed, like we've been for a long time now.
Well said.
And I think the Sasquatch probably are helping, I'm sure, in their own way, but they can't fully come out yet because it's not safe for them to, they have to protect themselves,
individual contact. I mean, it has to happen that way. And because another thing that's interesting to me is not everyone believes this stuff. And if you were to go on Fox News and share this information, you might get laughed at, ridiculed. You have to find a safe place to share this information and for people to even take you seriously, because the collective consciousness isn't quite there yet. So it's going to happen in waves, and I think those waves are going to get exponentially bigger as time goes on, until eventually, a few generations from now, we just know, and we are existing with them. But it's about finding that safe space. And I think it's interesting, the cabal or whatever you were referring to, Aaron, the Sasquatch, I believe, referred to them as the lower lords. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's
the lower lords.
Pretty explicit.
Yeah, that's a very accurate term. I like that. That's a very descriptive.
And the
uncivilization, which is also very accurate. But they talk about how they call them the lower lords. They talk about one of the main reasons they have to stay in hiding is because the lower lords are after them and are trying to exterminate them. And
which is what he just explained. Yeah,
because they know, because obviously we call them the cabal or the Illuminati or the different terms, but they know about these beings. Obviously they know their abilities. They know, like, the cabal is terrified of I think they're scared of us because of our innate power, that as soon as we tap into it, it's game over. But the Sasquatch already are tapped into there, so it's like they have to probably even more so attack them and keep them in hiding. And because as soon as they are able to join fully with humanity, it's definitely game over, in my opinion. So But I do think that day is coming very quickly. I think the dark's already on its way out. I think the frequency is raising. They're not frequency specific to where we're going. So they like where we're at right now, it seems like they know they have to lock stuff down right now or they're done. So they're kind of like throwing out everything. They're kind of on their last legs. They're in desperation mode because they know they're on a sinking ship unless they can like fully implement their system of control. Mm-hmm. And that's why we see so much craziness happening on the planet right now. But I do think they're, you know, I don't think we're not on, I don't believe we're on a negative timeline. And I know that's not like, oh, just sit back and do nothing. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying there's hope. And I'm saying people are waking up. You know, the planet is moving in a positive direction. There's just a lot of chaos and detoxing happening now. And
excuse me, have they mentioned to you anything about a split occurring? Basically, we hear about this split of consciousness, right? The lower density and the higher density. Can you explain what they've shared?
Yeah, totally. Because there's also a spiritual awakening and evolution that is ongoing in spite of all the obstacles, the opposition, and the forces that are trying to divert it or stop it. It's happening because that's our destiny. That's why we've been here for millions of years in this journey. So there's also a split happening because not only that's part of many ancient prophecies, for instance, because where we take is where we're going to end. It's going to lead where we going to end. So if we take the way to destruction, what we'll end up with. If we take the way to let's say harmony or to
enlightenment.
Yeah, exactly. That's where we'll end up eventually. And it's all an individual choice. It's a daily individual choice whether we want to co-create a world of destruction and war and fear, or a world of peace and harmony and enlightenment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and I agree. It's we have a choice right now, and we're all being presented with a choice. And the choice to free yourself and liberate yourself is the hard road right now, because they set up the system and the matrix to make it easy for you, and they support you. And because that's kind of like, it's very easy. Ignorance is bliss type of lifestyle. And the difficult path is the self-discovery path and standing on your own and walking against the crowd, going against the current. But let's talk about the Sasquatch a little more in depth. So you had your first encounter in 1981. You were age 17, if I'm not mistaken. Can you just explain to us what that looked like for you? You were just hanging out in the woods and you encountered one. What did that look like?
That first story I told a few times. I'm often asked about. I was 17. We were 10 young guy who went to camp by the Fraser River in the woods next to the Chehalis Indian Reserve, from whose language the name Sasquatch comes. I had no idea about that back then. It took me years afterward to realize what had taken place at night. When the middle of the night, pouring rain, pitch dark, black night, we heard heavy footsteps in the brush, and our post was holding our shelter was snapped. Our roof fell on our faces. We were trying to figure out what happened. There was another guy camped just off, and he came panicked, and he said, you won't believe me, but I just saw a big hairy monster put down the camp and vanished like a ghost. And back then we had not a single clue. We didn't even connect the story to Sasquatch back then. We couldn't make sense of it. And we thought maybe, he had seen something in a dream. We couldn't understand. 17 like that. But that launched me on a shamanic quest. Did my first vision quest that same week, and met my spirit guide, and that brought me to some elders and medicine people who could teach me many things about the spirit world, about dimensions, about and we can also call it quantum physics, quantum resonance, because basically it's proven by science. We still don't understand, but existence needs consciousness to manifest. It's all waves of possibilities until they collapse and are observed and become manifested reality. So basically, the whole universe works like that. We just have to practice. But some ancient wisdom, like shamanism, have tapped into these knowledges, and they help us to buy different practices to apply this knowledge as to transform destiny or affect events or people or lives. So it took me 33 years of this training before and occasional Sasquatch encounters and star people encounters, also with or without spaceship. Before I was finally ready and trained well enough to deal with paranormal phenomena. And the Sasquatch was coming and calling me out, coming and walking on my roof around my place and everything, until I want to know who those people are. And I went out, and they started right away to teach me, and they started this close connection, which can always manifest anywhere, anytime, because consciousness is not a local phenomenon. Consciousness can travel in space and time. If consciousness is the first condition to existence, then everything else can as well, like our bodies. So, in a nutshell, that's pretty much how this process, this connection came over many years of preparation and then connecting and practicing with them.
And you specifically mentioned an elder that began communicating with you. Did this motivate? Was it through him that the book idea came about?
Yeah, he was my main guide because, like any kind of people or tribes, if we look, for instance, in the native indigenous tribes around the world, we know those beings. Some very well, some include them in their ceremonies. But most in the tribe will stay away from them. They will say, don't bother them when they live over there. It's mostly the medicine people, shamans, different names, gifted seers, who act as ambassadors between them and the humans, as well as with the star beings, because there's the same family. We're all the same cosmic family, and the Sasquatch are our closest relatives in this family, but not our only one. So that elder, Camus, is he was not the only Sasquatch I communicated with or I met, even in the physical. But he was assigned as an elder to come and teach me and kind of open the way for this information to come out. And it was also a series of miracles and magic and paranormal events that brought this book series to come out, and the follow-up.
Mm. So the elder Camus, is that what you said? Would he be on this star, this council? Is he one from that council?
Yeah.
So what has he shared with you as far as, I mean, the basics of like their medicine? Like you mentioned the medicine men and medicine women and like their healing abilities and things of that nature. Have they taught you about that?
It's infinite, all the fields of knowledge that can be addressed. One of the main thing is to remember the spiritual entity we are, also this power we have, because we all create our own timeline. That's why there is going to be two timelines for humanity that will part gradually until there's two different realities. That's one way to simplify. But we choose the road we want. But it's the same in every action we take. The intention, the power of the intention, we transform the world just with our thoughts. If they're well focused and thoughts manifest into words that bring actions and that bring results.
So is this, I guess I was asking more specifically about healing abilities. Ways have they shown you natural remedies and things that you can do for yourself that has nothing to do with big pharma or modern medicine?
Yeah, well, personally, I have studied and used and practiced with medicinal plants for like 4 decades, and so they helped quite a few people just for learning about it, gathering some, making salves, and stuff. Natural medicine will always be the best, the most trustable we can think about. Then again, it goes to another level where our own energy can be a healer. We can, without any external support, we can heal. Starting with us, we can self-heal. There are techniques that I've practiced that consist in pretty much letting the universal pure energy come and cleanse along our body, all the different ailments or blockages we might have or pains. And it's a meditation. It's really efficient. I could recommend this practice that takes rid of much of everything if you focus well enough, because 95% of disease come as a psychic cause.
Yep.
So in this same way, we can use our hands, for instance. Some people are gifted with that to heal other people, like to make that energy leave the body or in the soul.
Right. Yeah, and it all goes back to the intention, like you said, the thoughts, and that creates the reality. I think it's beautiful. So, to your understanding, how many different species of Sasquatch are there? And I mean, I've heard reports. I haven't heard reports of very small ones. Would that be juvenile, or could that be a race that just doesn't get that tall? Gigantic 10, 15 feet tall ones and the average 6 foot. Are these all different, or is it just different ages? What does that look like?
There's definitely different genetics. From my own experience in Australia, I met the small ones. You don't know more than 3 or 4 feet, and it can be like an elder, but that's how big as they grow. Those small ones are known mostly around the southern Pacific and Philippines, New Zealand, Sri Lanka. They're quite, and in Indonesia. There's also bigger ones. There's also other traits like I've seen the ones they call Dooliga in Southern Australia. They have an opposed tongue with their foot, as most Sasquatch here have feet like us, but those Dooliga, they have an opposed tongue. Apparently, the Yeti too. I haven't seen Yeti firsthand. So there are different lineages and probably subspecies and different hybrids because they also interbred with different hominins. And who knows how many interventions from star beings that's been done.
And on average, how long do they live?
This is probably also related to a very lineage and individuals, because some individuals, well, like any species, including humans, can reach immortality. They can reach a certain level where they can take their bodies in the other dimension.
But do they live to be like thousands of years old, possibly? Like,
I believe so. I believe so. At least the ones I'm familiar with from the Pacific Northwest that I've met more. I had more of my communications with those clans. I've met different ones too. Back east, there's some who look like a dogman almost. They're not. They're again, that's another topic because there's many classes of dogman, so let's not go there. But there's different. You can feel if you meet them that they have their own energies, like their own cultural traits, maybe, or collective consciousness. But they're all similar somehow. They have things in common.
So the Vancouver Island area, British Columbia, Washington State, that's, I guess, the primary hotspot, you would say. I mean, there's sightings everywhere. But why do they, does it have to do with the wildlife there and just the nature of the land? Is that why they choose to reside there? Or is there another reason energetically?
There's probably a few reasons. One is that the Pacific Northwest is still the largest wilderness on the continent. If we go from, let's say, Oregon or Washington to Alaska, the smallest, and maybe the far north is the smallest population density, and it's very hard to go in those mountains. It's meant to be wilderness. It's never going to be big cities out there. So also there's a huge network of caves, and there's many stories on Vancouver Island, which is called the Island of Caves, and northern Washington on Colville, southern BC. There's several stories of Sasquatch clans living in caves there, in deep underground caves where they're hidden from.
Right.
Right.
That's interesting, the cave network thing. I mean, there's, even in Missouri here, there's a massive cave network that most people are unaware of. And there's, I guess you could say there's a lot of sightings here in Missouri as well, but really everywhere.
And what, I have a question. So what, so obviously there's a lot of, if you want to connect with them, you have to be in the right state. You have to be, come with love and not, because they can sense your intentions a mile away. And if you're coming to either hunt them, obviously, or if you're coming to just get a video so you can blast it out to the world to prove they exist, or if you're coming to get rich off of, or your ego or whatever, they're going to they know that. They know your intentions, and you're either not going to see them at all, or they're going to scare you away, or something's going to go wrong and they're going to stop you from, they're going to protect themselves, obviously. But generally, you're just probably not going to see them at all if you have the wrong intentions, and that's why, you know, you hear stories of these people like, oh, they don't exist because I went all over the place looking for them and never saw or heard anything. And it's like, well, what were your intentions going to find, you know, there you go. People aren't thinking in this way. Like, they don't understand who these beings are, how advanced they are. They're not just these big apes. That's not at all what they are. And in the book, they even say, well, they're not even related to the apes. That's a complete misconception. They say we're actually more related to apes than they are. They're like, if anyone was the ape people, it would actually be humans. They're way more ancient than modern day humans. They say they're kind of like our elder brother, so to speak. But yeah, so if you want to connect with them, you have to be in the right state, come with love and a pure intention, and then, you know, maybe consistently, and eventually when they sense that, or if they want to connect with you, then they will. Right.
Yeah, there's a more and more people who have contacts, and what has proven efficient, has proven the best, if not the only successful approach, as you described, is you go there with a good intention, no ulterior motives, no agenda. You don't want to impose yourself on them. You don't want to try to trick or lure or trap or nothing like that, because that's the best turnoff you've never heard of them if you go with that approach. But so far, I have assisted over 100 people in having their first contact. And that's how it starts. Is you have to know how to approach them. You have to have the right intention, and that means respect. That means peaceful, loving, humble. You're not try to outsmart them. You're gonna regret it. And that means if you come with this, they feel you before you're there, and they will say, maybe this guy, we can give him, like, let's say, a hoot today, or a little stick arrangement, or a little sign to see how they react, because it's a long process. They're in no rush. They don't have to walk in front of our camera as we wait there. So, and that's how contacts develop. Gifting. I don't like to use the word habituation because it's not an animal. It's more like we approach a friend, and a wise one that we respect. So we don't want to force them into doing what we like. If they want a gift, they take it. If they don't, they leave it. If they want to give us something back, they do. But with all these steps, it's how we learn to know them, and not to, like, try to fit them in our mold or this or that scientific taxon, or the Gigantopithecus or Neanderthal, neither one. So let's learn from them. That's the best way. And from so far, I've met over 500 people who have had contacts, and over 300 have shared their experiences on my website, Scenic Sasquatch. So I feel, and I see with documentation, that there's more and more contacts being made, not only with Sasquatch, but with star people as well, because we're in the need of this help.
And you shared a story about, I forgot where you went. You were out there for 8 days, and it wasn't until the 8th day that you decided to do a ceremony, make an offering, and that's when they finally showed themselves. Maybe you could tell that story, but I think it's a good story, or a great example of, you know, how much time and effort you have to put in. You're not just going to go to the hot spot and for 2 hours and walk around like, oh, there's nothing here, and leave. You spend a lot of time, and then at the end of that time is whenever you had your experience. Can you explain that, please?
Yeah, that was my first close encounter with Camus. I should say conversation, because we met before. But that was when I was doing this vision quest on Vancouver Island by Kennedy Lake, especially to meet them. I went there for that purpose. And the first day I saw footprints, but And I heard mumblings in the forest, and I felt their energy, but I kept looking around like, like a tourist, like a curious guy who was trying to see something with his camera. Didn't see much for a first week. And then after a while, I was just being in nature with the animals. I saw, cougar, wolves, and just being at peace with those relatives. It also shows them that, this guy feels good in nature. He's part of us, If not, they're like freaking out, shooting at everything. So then I did the ceremony because I've practiced those ways with simple chants and drum and native flute, smudge. And that's the night where he came. And he came, definitely made himself heard long before, banging on trees, 2 trees, then shaking and breaking heavy trees. And I heard his footstep, and he sat right behind my tent. And that was, I must say, that was what I was there for. But I was freaked out. I didn't know yet what to expect or who they really were. I just knew they were coming on my way all the time. It had to be a reason. So that's when we got to know each other. Basically, we got to communicate, and I found they were wise and they were peaceful beings, and they were keepers of nature, and they're trying to help us and guide us back into being keepers of this planet as well.
So he showed up in the physical, and
yeah.
So how tall was he at the time?
7 feet.
And
I'd seen him before in 2003 with another friend, same area in Vancouver, by on the road.
And help me understand, like, what their face looks like. Is it how it's always depicted? Is it more of a human face with no hair and then the hair everywhere else? What does it look like?
First, every individual is different, as much as we are. So it's really hard to say what does a human face look like,
Right.
But there's been an artist who made a portrait of Camus on my indications. I have one too. That resemble closely, it's not photo. And also very often I've noticed that their face is the last part of themselves they will clearly reveal, they will clearly show to you, because you have to get used to their presence kind of first. Just feeling their psychic energy is really intense. When the face, very often, in my case, as with many people, experiencers, they might first contact you in dreams or meditations and show you images and telepathy that you get used to them. You don't freak out right away, because they can be impressive. But what do they look like? There's, like I said, very many different types. That ones, they're close, we could say, because they carry some modern human DNA. They have some modern human traits, but they have something. So we can say they're maybe, I don't know, half or what percentage, but they have some human aspects.
Right.
And something else.
Yeah, I think it's hard to describe all of them as a whole. I guess I just meant him in particular. Were you shocked to see like how human-like he was, or was it what you imagined?
We can say a human with some kind of very ancient, we could be tempted to say primitive traits. He has a beard and hair, apart from body hair.
Mhm.
I was given, he gave me actually 2 samples of his hair, and one was a very nice, long, half braided locks that I shared with over a dozen people, from different
Wow.
continents.
That's amazing.
So, whenever you communicate with them, or I guess channel them, whatever that looks like, is it always just one individual? Because I've heard channelers a lot of times when they're communicating with a higher intelligence, it's a collective. They come to you as a we, as instead of an individual. Is that how that works?
Most often, exactly, yeah. Especially when the messages of collective interest. There might be an individual, let's say like Camus, who's like the channeler, the messenger, but he speaks on behalf of his collective consciousness, his council of elders. So the way, for me, it's different for every people, but when a channel happens, it's just like switching on the right frequency, the right station, and then communication can engage. It's not often in words for me. It's more like direct information download,
Mm-hmm.
like a computer file full of information that comes in, and then it's mine to process and decode. Sometimes words also come, especially when I write,
Right.
and images.
So when he sat down behind your tent, it was all telepathic. There was no vocalization. I mean, people do record them making sounds, but it doesn't seem to be anything like it doesn't sound like a intelligent language. Maybe it is, we just don't understand it. But it seems to me that if they're speaking in telepathy, they don't really need to use their vocal cords as much.
Exactly. That's one of the first thing he told me. That well, they can use vocals, but if you can talk in telepathy and give a whole computer file information download in one thought, why would you try to explain it in words? It's like much faster and much more efficient. And if depending on how well receptive is the other person in the conversation. But if it's willingly engage, practice, it becomes like plugging another computer in your own.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a common reported thing with people with ET interactions, where they say they get this telepathic download, like you just said, like a file, where it's just like they just instantly have this full body of information downloaded like into them, and they just know everything that being wanted them to know instantly.
Right.
So Sasquatch, it sounds like, have that exact same ability.
Yes, that's actually what I experienced with the inner earth being. It was just like so much, like it's impossible to comprehend how it's all in an instant when you're trying to explain it. But
right.
Earlier I mentioned the hollow moon. What have they shared with you about our moon?
Yeah, well, they describe how the moon. Well, this one they say it's the 4th moon, the one we see.
The 4th moon?
Yeah, one natural that collapsed, and a couple more artificial ones
that are existing right now that we just don't see.
Yeah, well, some are. One was collapsed, and another one is orbiting the solar system. This moon we see, and that I was amazed myself. It's one example of information that a channel wrote and published, and found afterward so many confirmations from so many sources, including scientific sources. In the 50s, the scientists, astronomers have been saying the moon is hollow. It doesn't have the mass for the volume. It doesn't behave like many have said. It's an artificial satellite.
Mm-hmm.
We always have the same face facing us. It's exactly 400 times smaller and 400 times closer than the sun, so it covers it just perfectly. And there's plenty of other, evidences that, including many photos of structures, flying ships. Then we find that information in many ancient sources as well as new, like whistleblowers from secret space programs and stuff like that.
So
it's an alien base, basically.
Yeah.
And they specifically told you the moon was hollow?
Yeah, it was built, this one. It's covered with a thick layer of silica and helium-3, I believe, which is collected by the sun rays on the lunar surface, and that are used as nuclear fuel.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot more going on with that than most people are ready to hear yet, I don't think.
Yeah.
You also mentioned Antarctica basically being part of Lemuria once, or Atlantis. I don't really know how that works, but what have they shared with you about Antarctica? Is there more to discover there?
Well, first we know it's not always been under the ice. In those times, there was life. They have found plenty of dinosaur bones and tropical forests in Antarctica, but they also have found a lot of ancient human artificers, some probably older than human. Pyramids, the ground bases, and there's leaks and photos and reports, and that's one reason why Antarctica is the only place forbidden, basically, to the public. You need special permissions and permits to go there, and it's doesn't belong to any country because there's someone else. Other life forms are living in Antarctica.
Right. It's not just some cold, barren wasteland. And it's probably, I mean, we don't know what's going on the surface, but I would imagine it's all underneath the ice. What's happening right now, which we've heard many whistleblowers talk about. So that resonates definitely. I forgot what I was just going to follow up with. As far as Earth being like a intergalactic spaceport or something at one point, I think the Sasquatch used to talk about that, but now obviously, we've been suppressed, and you have a hard time even convincing people that their space even exists at this point. But I guess Antarctica would be one of those places that might still be acting as a spaceport.
That makes a lot of sense. Actually, the whole planet has visitors going in and out every day. There's tens of thousands of reports of UFOs every year, probably per country. There's and increasingly more and more, especially now everybody has a camera, and there's more talks about it, so more people are inclined to share their experience, but there's also more and more contacts. And there's a reason, is because we're at a crucial point of our evolution. And we need to remember, one of the important things, we need to remember we're not alone, we're part of a bigger family, a great chain of life.
Right.
So that gives us a responsibility in this universe.
Yes, I agree. And last question before we wrap this up. Have they shared anything with you about the dinosaurs?
The first, I can say the first message I received in 1983 in the petrified forest of Arizona, where I snuck in and spent a night there. And that's the first time I had a Sasquatch talk to me. I didn't understand what was going on back then. I thought it was a vision, but he showed me like 3D holographic images, kind of. When his people was walking with the dinosaurs. There was one thing that's I knew from then on that the Sasquatch had been there with the dinosaur. The things I've discovered afterward, much later, is that among all those so-called species of dinosaurs, there were some intelligent species. There were some evolved reptilian species that could build cities and operate technologies. And there, I found archaeological confirmation of this, I can say, by the Grand Canyon, East Rim, where there's pyramids. They're out there. Just have to go and see them. There's pyramids, and there are blocks with petrified huge fossil beds of dinosaurs there. But some are like embedded into the building blocks.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's worth considering. But I'm sure from what I've learned and seen in my life that the dinosaurs were not all just big lizards. There were some intelligent reptilians on it now.
Mm-hmm. And very bird-like even. Yeah. And what about dragons? Have they ever came into the mix? Would some of the dinosaurs that we think were dinosaurs actually dragons? And maybe that would explain the wings.
Yeah, there's definitely stories of dragons are everywhere since ever.
Right.
They've been around. There's probably less nowadays, or they live in underground caves. Or once in a while, we hear of sightings, and there's also other beings like giant sea serpent that sighted. I got to see in British Columbia. And it's other beings like that look like pterodactyl or pteranodon type of being. Mm-hmm. They're booked with reports from 20 states and other countries, which I got to see once as well. This
pterodactyl.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
They come through portals. That's where it gets complicated a little bit because there's parallel dimensions and timelines, and past and future can sometimes connect. And some beings appear out of the blue and then return to another plane. So that's why maybe they're hard to find here.
Sure. I mean, we've heard a number of people share their experiences and sightings of pterodactyls. And the portal thing makes perfect sense. I think there's a natural portal system all over the planet, and probably the Sasquatch utilizes it as well.
Yeah.
Right.
And NASA has been studying the natural portals, and they can be created artificially as well, or even with consciousness. And that's why you see them appear and disappear.
So essentially, an individual can achieve, they can create a portal themselves. If they achieve a level of consciousness, they can manifest one and go through it, and it disappears, and we can travel that way. So I'm going to start training right now when we hang up.
Good idea.
So is there anything else that you would like to share, or anything you would end with, or any final words before we wrap this up?
Well, I would invite the audience to check my website, scenicsasquatch.com. There's my 7 books listed there, one every year so far. I hope to carry on this way. And there's over 900 posts with links and articles and videos information.
Great. And we will put that link below. But just for the audio people, could you mention the website one more time?
ScenicSasquatch.com. And Scenic, SCENIC, stands for Sasquatch Close Encounter Network for Interspecies Communication.
Oh, great.
Nice. That's awesome.
ScenicSasquatch.com. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was a pleasure. You're a wealth of information. I think what you're doing is a beautiful thing. They chose the right person, and keep the books coming. I'm definitely going to be diving into this information a little deeper. It fascinates me to no end. So thanks again for everything that you do. And thank you guys for tuning in. We love you all. If you feel compelled to join us at the conference, tickets are still available. We'd love to see you there. And if you can't make it, grab a live stream pass. It's going to be a lot of fun. That's right around the corner, 18 days away. So we look forward to seeing you all there. Have a great evening, everyone. We love you, and good night.
Good night, guys.
There was a CIA director named William Colby who in the 1980s said, "We'll know our disinformation campaigns are successful when everything the American people believe is fake."
When we realize how powerful we are when we set our intentions and we realize that we aren't just this, we are just these multi-dimensional light beings, and time is an illusion, and it's everything's a perception, then you can go forward and backwards and embody it and just pop out and go and do this work. We can do amazing things when we set the right intentions to do it.
And I said, this is us on this plane. That's what this is. We're going to the moon. And he said, this thing is a lot older than you think it is. And we've been going to the moon a long time. But I wrote on it, I knew that we went to the moon. And so I always knew there was a base on the moon from a young age.
And our DNA is a complex recording system of the history of the entire universe, the history, of everything, that not just this timeline that we know, but multiple timelines of reality.
There are a total of 9 different categories of planets in the universe. We people on Earth, we are living on a category 1 planet, like elementary school students. And the Theobans, they are living on a category 9 planet, like college professors. So they have been really guiding us throughout history.
Joachim let us know that this facility under the Sandia Mountain is considered an information station for interstellar travelers coming to the planet. They tell us that their facility was retrofitted into the ancient tunnel system that already existed.
And as far as the bending the space-time continuum, I've had something like that happen. And what seemed like about a 5-minute encounter has been 4.5 hours of missing time. And I was completely conscious. And when you're dealing with a type 3, type 4, type 5 civilizations that can work with the different coexisting timelines, all bets are off, man.
Every time we have Bigfoot activity out there, we're having ETs and orbs and stuff like that. We have a lot of this stuff documented. As a matter of fact, I'm a member of 3 different teams, and I work with people from all over the country out in the field. And we actually have documented a portal, something that we consider to be a portal opening. And we sent 2 of our team members inside of it. And
really?
They disappeared and then came back out.
I would suggest that we take it one step further and say humanity has never known who we are. We've always been in the thought control matrix. And one step further, perhaps we could say that we're in a consciously controlled state of hypnosis. In other words, are the thought control matrix creators constantly bombarding us with frequencies that keep us from being telepathic, that keep us from remembering who we are? The thought control matrix was set up, and we have never known our potential, our power, our beauty, our incredible connection.
It makes no sense at all. There is no reason for it other than the programming that we've received for generations, because it's all about order. It's all about listen to your elders, listen to the teachers, listen to the adults, listen. And what that does is it dims the light of the child, and it makes them feel like they don't have a voice. And why that's designed that way by the dark side, and that's in the system, is so that they grow up and they just listen to, and they do what they're told, and they're good little boys and good little girls, and they lose their sense of self. They lose their north, their true north. Yeah. So many adults are walking around in this world they don't know who they are.
So the planet itself is now beginning to split. It's beginning to divide again into a higher vibrational Earth and a lower vibrational Earth. And the race of man is dividing with it. And we're becoming less and less aware of one another. And over time, what will happen, and I don't know how long this will be, one world will have all higher vibrational beings on it, and the other one will all be third dimensional beings, and we will not perceive each other anymore.